I'm standing in Quay Lane, just north of the railway arch and outside the former drill hall, which is now the Quays, a reception centre. Looking north from here, across the roundabout, is an area where 100 years ago you would have seen many chimneys, as it was the centre of Sittingbourne's brickmaking industry.
Right next to this, and catering to the many hundreds of workers in the area on Quay Lane, stood a pub called the White Hart. It is a common name for a pub, and this one is not to be confused with the one in the High Street or Milton High Street or in Newington. When William Vallance built this inn, he transferred the name from the White Hart on the frontage of his High Street brewery. It was known as the White Hart for most of its existence, but was given a change of sign during 1992. Thomas Snelling was the licensee in 1828, perhaps he was the first one here. Henry Jarrett was here in 1834, and Thomas Smith in his 60s was here in 1840 with his wife and a few lodgers. Smith was followed in 1847 by 24-year-old William Ford and his wife. From 1851, 30-year-old Charles Clinch and his wife ran the inn for Stile and Winch and had a few lodgers, mainly brickfield labourers, in the household on census night. This street was at this time called Water Lane, one of 3 waterlogged streets in the district bearing the same name. One became St Paul Street in Milton, one Cockleshell Walk, and this one Quay Lane. The White Hart then stood alone with its stables and outbuildings. It was not until the 1860s that a terrace of houses was put up beside it. Charles may well have been related to John Clinch, the farmer of 100 acres who lived in Bayford Farmhouse. Both were born in Doddington. William Johnson took on the pub from him in 1862 and then Stephen Rook in 1871. He died in 1875 aged 52, and his widow Louisa then ran the pub for over a decade. By 1891 Gilbert Carling and his family were here. No lodgers mentioned on census night. By 1901 Ephraim Watson was here with his wife and daughters, but this was short-lived, and in 1902 the licence is recorded as passing from him to William Chapman. The scale and extent of the brickworks behind the pub can be seen on this 1908 map. Chapman certainly had the pub until the outbreak of the First World War. He was 68 in 1911, when he passed it to, presumably his son, William Thomas Chapman. A William Chapman is listed here still in 1922. Mary Hughes was the licensee in 1930, but by the outbreak of World War II, it was run by William Watson and his wife. This street party in Quay Lane was probably in 1937. The man in the white hat at the centre is the Vicar of St Michael's, the Reverend A. Jones. The lady with the baby in her lap we know is Daisy Rumble and her son David. In the background is the White Hart. But could the man in the waistcoat and bow tie at the back be the landlord, William Watson? The brickfields industry can be seen in this photograph behind the White Hart. Ernest or Ernie Allen was the landlord of the White Hart during the 1940s. He stepped down from the Home Guard, where he was a captain, but continued to work as a carpenter after moving his family from West Lane to the White Hart. His daughter Joyce remembered that they used to open from 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and from 6 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Monday to Saturday. On Sundays, the hours were shorter, from 12 until 3 p.m. and then from 7 till 10 in the evening. Publicans were in trouble if they allowed their pubs to stay open beyond these times. It was also a punishable offence to serve anybody who was obviously drunk. Joyce recalled, "We took over the White Hart in 1942, and so of course the first few years we were at war. Our customers were mostly local, with skippers and crew from the barges coming into the quay, and workers from the brickfields directly behind us. There were troops stationed at the drill hall just across the road, so a large percentage of customers were soldiers. As it was wartime, landlords were required to do war work, and as my father was by trade a joiner, he was directed to Sheerness Dockyard to work so many hours a week. As a consequence, the bar was often filled with naval officers, male and female. On those occasions, Dad would hang a Union Jack across the door of their bar to give them some privacy. We children acquired a taste for ship's chocolate. It was customary, when you took over a pub, to be presented with an inventory of items which you would have to produce in your turn when you left. Joyce recalled some of the items at the White Hart with distaste. I remember being horrified when confronted with cages of stuffed birds and small animals. I think the largest was a badger, and a mangy fox's head. Fortunately, my mother was equally appalled, and these items plus a few more disappeared until we left. Joyce continued. There were 3 bars: saloon, public and jug and bottle. There was also a small room tacked onto one end, known as the Abode of Love. It always puzzled us as to why it was so called, and we understood from the brewers that there were others. Could it have been used by prostitutes at some earlier period? Of course, there were unforgettable characters amongst them, like the old lady who would come in to the Jug and Bottle every evening about 9 o'clock, where she would drink 2 pints of stout and present her jug to be filled with another 2 pints. I think she probably slept well. Then there was the man who came in at lunchtime with his horse and cart after he'd been emptying cesspits or something similar. He wore a long black coat that had gone green with age and other things related to his job. He would sit almost on top of the open fire, no central heating in those days, when the heat would release the odours from the coat, and he always had that bar to himself. On the evenings of darts matches, whether home or away, it always seemed to be our responsibility to provide the sandwiches, mountains of them. There were outings too, when Dad would hire a charabanc and all those wishing to go would pay so much a week. No visits to stately homes in those days. A day at Margate was the first choice. The landlord, Ernie Allen, on the left. Behind him is Frank Guthrie. After the war, the brickfields closed, barges stopped coming into the quay, and business was slow. Ernie gave up the pub in 1952. In the 1970s, the White Hart is remembered affectionately by those who worked in the area, drank there at lunchtimes, played bar billiards, or had their Christmas drinks there. The licensees, we believe, were Joan and Alf Ansell.
In 1992, the pub was given a name change. The Barge was perhaps a well-chosen name for a pub so close to the creek, where sailing barges for so many years were built and sailed.
The surrounding houses were demolished, and the inn stood amidst the Eurolink and Crown Quay Lane industrial estates. Things didn't really pick up after the name change in 1992. The following posting from 2007 was recently found on the internet. One of the worst pubs I've ever been in, and I've been in many. If you can, avoid the Neanderthals at the bar, but beware, mind the children running around throwing darts randomly. I wish I could give it 0 stars, but I'm forced to give it a generous 1. In 2008, the old building was closed down, boarded up and for sale. By 2010, it was demolished, though the Barge sign remained alone for a time.
Today, the Crown Quay Lane brickfield site, which had become a trading estate, is being redeveloped for housing. And there is little trace of the brickfield or the pub which once stood here.
If you have found this video interesting, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit our website.